In the late hours of May 19, 1994, an emergency fire call reached the police station reporting a blaze at a luxurious mansion in Samseong-dong, Gangnam District, Seoul, South Korea. Firefighters arrived quickly and extinguished the flames within 20 minutes, but tragically discovered 2 charred bodies in the ruins. The victims were none other than the owners of the mansion, Mr. Park Soon-tae and his wife. Meanwhile, their 23-year-old son, Park Hansang, and his 13-year-old cousin had managed to escape. However, the autopsy revealed shocking details. Both bodies were still bleeding and had over 30 stab wounds each, alarming signs that immediately alerted investigators that this was no ordinary fire. This case shocked South Korean society when it occurred and remains one of the most notorious crimes in the country's history. The person who called the police was none other than the homeowner's son, Hansang. When authorities arrived at the scene, they noticed Hansang had injuries and immediately dispatched an ambulance to take him to the hospital for medical care. There, Hansang recounted that he had been awakened by the sound of breaking glass, and when he opened his bedroom door, the flames had already become too intense for him to reach his parents' room. In the emergency, he claimed he had no choice but to break a window to escape and call for help. The fire-damaged mansion was valued at 1.3 billion won, approximately $1.3 million, with a lush front lawn and a total area of about 5,400 square feet. Located in the most affluent residential area, the Park couple, while not among the wealthiest elites, were well-known prosperous individuals. News of the tragedy spread quickly, causing a sensation throughout the neighborhood. During the funeral, Hansang was so overcome with grief and self-blame that he fainted in front of his parents' coffins. Initially, police handled the situation as a routine fire, but they quickly noticed suspicious irregularities. Although the bodies were partially burned, investigators discovered the horrifying truth. Mr. Soon-tae's body had 34 stab wounds from head to toe, while his wife's body bore 27 similar wounds. Notably, fatal wounds to the heart and neck of both victims remained clearly visible despite the fire damage. Adding to the suspicion was the autopsy finding that revealed no traces of soot in the airways or lungs of either victim, indicating they had died before the fire started. With this evidence, police immediately concluded this was a murder disguised as a fire. The investigation headquarters immediately mobilized an elite team of 35 officers to conduct the investigation. In the early stages of the investigation, detectives noticed a significant detail. All the valuable cash, checks, and a safe full of expensive jewelry in the Park's home remained intact. There were no signs of forced entry or ransacking, which led them to temporarily rule out the theory of a planned robbery leading to murder. Through interviews with neighbors, police gathered information that even the guard dogs in the area hadn't barked on that fateful night, a detail implicitly confirming that the perpetrator was likely someone familiar to the family. With this clue, the focus of the investigation quickly shifted to the social network of the Park couple, but due to initial misdirection, the investigation had yet to achieve any breakthrough. Then one day, a nurse at Gangnam Hospital provided a crucial piece of evidence related to Hansang, who had been admitted with injuries to his hands and feet. During a comprehensive examination to assess whether his body had any other injuries, medical staff began examining his head. Strangely, the nurse discovered blood in Hansang's hair, but after careful examination, there were no wounds on his scalp. Even more notably, they found a clear tooth mark on his ankle, as if someone had bitten down hard. Recognizing the importance of these findings, the medical team quickly notified the police. Additionally, relatives of the Park family contacted investigators, revealing Hansang's bizarre behavior during the funeral. According to them, Hansang had been sobbing uncontrollably to the point of fainting just minutes before the ceremony. Yet shortly after, he was spotted sneaking off to a corner, whispering to his girlfriend on the phone, "As soon as this funeral is over, I'll sell all of my father's assets and go abroad to do business." What shocked the relatives most was the strange smile, completely inappropriate for the mournful atmosphere that appeared on Hansang's face when he ended the call. From the beginning of the investigation, police officers had felt something was off about Hansang's behavior. They wondered why, upon discovering the fire, instead of trying to warn his parents and cousin, he chose to escape first. However, they initially struggled to connect the image of a grieving son mourning his parents with the portrait of a ruthless killer. Now, with the new clues from the hospital nurse and relatives' accounts, suspicion quickly shifted toward Hansang, and the investigation team decided to focus all their efforts on clarifying his role in this bloody tragedy. The investigation progressed more rapidly than anyone had predicted. Forensic analysis provided irrefutable evidence. The blood in Hansang's hair perfectly matched blood samples from his parents' bodies. More significantly, the tooth mark found on his ankle matched perfectly with the dental structure of his late father, Mr. Park Soon-tae, as if it were the victim's final effort to identify his attacker. At the scene, forensic experts used luminol reagent and discovered large areas of blood reaction that had been attempted to be erased, revealing the true scale of the bloody attack. Just 1 week after the tragedy, on May 26th, with solid evidence in hand, police arrested Hansang on charges of murdering his own parents. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Hansang quickly confessed to the entire crime, even expressing relief at finally being free from the burden of his terrible secret. He admitted that in the nights following the murders, he couldn't sleep. When asked about his motive, Hansang blamed his father's harsh criticism. The fundamental cause was my father's harsh words. He always said, "You can't do anything right, and you never finish anything properly." He claimed that since he was 10 years old, for 13 years, he had received no praise from his parents because they were dissatisfied with his academic performance and lifestyle, so he always had to endure criticism and indescribable physical punishment. This made him willing to go to any length for revenge and to gain control of his parents' assets. The Park couple had begun their business journey when they were very young. In 1971, when they welcomed their firstborn son, Hansang, they were just entrepreneurs starting with nothing. Through perseverance and vision, they transformed a small pharmacy in Cheonan City in South Chungcheong Province into an empire of Oriental medicine. From there, they expanded with the Deokyang Hanyakbang Oriental Medicine Pharmacy in the bustling Dongdaemun and Myeongdong markets in Seoul, along with a modern hospital. In this family business model, Mrs. Park took on the role of CEO, managing all the company's operations. Meanwhile, Mr. Park focused on expanding relationships and industry standing, reaching the peak of his career when appointed as the company's legal representative in 1992. Recognition from the professional community was further solidified when he was elected chairman of the Seoul branch of the Oriental Medicine Association shortly before the tragedy occurred. Business success helped them build an impressive asset empire. They owned a 4-story building in Seoul's prosperous Seongdong area, along with a large fruit orchard worth 5 billion won, 5 million in Cheonan, and many other valuable properties. The total assets, including real estate and cash of the Park Soon-tae couple, were estimated at about 10 billion won, $10 million, a fortune that placed them among the wealthy families in Korean society at that time. Hansang, born into wealth, was the eldest son of the Park couple. In that era, fathers typically passed family businesses to their eldest sons. Although they later had a second son, Park Young-sang, Hansang's upbringing was pampered with high expectations. His parents were devout believers who often sought advice from their church pastor on how to raise children well. For his education, they purchased a house in a school district where many prestigious schools with high educational quality were concentrated, including elementary, middle, and high schools. Thus, Hansang received education in South Korea's top educational environment from an early age. From elementary school, he made a strong impression by achieving perfect scores in all subjects when he was just in 3rd grade. This, combined with the special love for their firstborn son, blinded his parents into believing they were raising an academic genius. Early on, they envisioned a bright future for their beloved child. Working in pharmaceuticals, they cherished dreams that their son would attend a Korean medical school and later take over the family's medical and pharmaceutical business. As a teenager, he was sent to a modern high school, the only co-ed private school in Gangnam's School District 8, also the first high school in South Korea equipped with elevators. Despite enjoying the best educational resources, Hansang never once expressed interest in medicine. Instead, his passion lay in automobiles, and he dreamed of working in automotive innovation. This wasn't a poor career choice, but unfortunately, his academic performance couldn't meet the requirements. Eventually, he entered a local university, majoring in civil and environmental engineering at Wonkwang University in Ilsan. At that time, it wasn't uncommon for wealthy people in South Korea to bribe officials to transfer students to different schools. Park Soon-tae was also looking for opportunities to transfer his son to a Korean medical school, but according to college classmates' memories, Hansang hardly attended classes and frequently engaged in drinking, fighting, gambling, and bullying at school, earning him a bad reputation. Although they had begun addressing various problems for their son, the couple still felt the issues weren't serious. They allowed him to take a break from university after his first year to complete military service first, planning to research Korean language academies after his discharge. In November 1991, 20-year-old Hansang chose to fulfill his military service by joining the South Korean National Guard. National Guard servicemen had shorter working and service times compared to other military branches, also called short-term military service. The family had pulled strings here as well. After joining the military, Hansang didn't have to endure the hardships of military life, and each evening had time to live the lifestyle of the Orange Tribe. The Orange Tribe referred to the rich children in Seoul's Apgujeong-dong, Gangnam district during the 1990s in South Korea. These individuals were obsessed with Western culture, drove expensive imported cars, bought imported goods, spent lavishly, enjoyed partying, and even used prohibited substances, creating significant pressure on social security. Hansang was part of this group. Hansang, who daily sought thrills, wasn't confident about his appearance, but he always believed that if he showed off money and expensive cars, he could easily befriend the opposite sex. It was also because of a one-night stand that left a girl pregnant that his parents had to pay compensation to resolve the issue. From the Park's perspective, their son was going against their expectations, constantly wasting the assets they had painstakingly accumulated from nothing, so they naturally had to educate him strictly. In July 1993, after 2 years of military service, 22-year-old Hansang was discharged and refused to return to university. Park Soon-tae decided to send him to study in the United States. Hansang entered Pacific School in Fresno, California, and began his life as an international student. Each month, his parents gave him $2,000 for living expenses. He rented an apartment for himself at $530 per month, but having been accustomed to partying and not studying in Korea, he became even less focused on academics in America. He couldn't speak English and rarely attended school. 2 months after arriving in the U.S., he met some international students in similar situations and was introduced to American casinos. Initially, Hansang only gambled near school, but his gambling addiction grew. After becoming addicted, he even traveled to other states to gamble, playing cards with complete strangers. He could lose $1,300 in a single night, equivalent to more than 2 months' rent. But to win back what he'd lost, he had to visit casinos 3 to 4 times a week. Eventually, he lost all his living expenses at a casino in Las Vegas, totaling $23,000. In January 1994, Hansang, now penniless, returned to South Korea, asking his father for more money to buy a car. Park Soon-tae placed what he considered his final trust in his son. Hansang then brought $18,000 back to the U.S. He had his friend Kim act as guarantor to buy a Honda Accord worth $21,000. The money he brought was also gambled away. His lavish lifestyle ultimately exhausted all resources, and Hansang's life in America could not continue. On April 20th, 1994, Hansang secretly returned to South Korea without telling his parents. Since credit card issuance was much easier at that time than it is now, Hansang easily obtained one. He used this credit card as collateral, contacted a loan shark, and borrowed a total of 2.16 million won, about $2,160, which he also spent with friends. But just 3 days later, his secret return was discovered by relatives. On April 23rd, Hansang hurriedly fled back to the U.S. Finally, due to his indulgence in drinking and gambling, his debts mounted, gambling debts and loan shark debts of 20 million won, plus 17 million in interest, totaling 37 million won, approximately $37,000. After learning of the situation, Park Soon-tae's patience reached its limit. He immediately called his son back to South Korea, quickly ending his study abroad experience. The Park couple had placed all their hopes in him, but reality had slapped them hard in the face. Filled with anger, they refused to pay his debts. Park Soon-tae used a horse riding crop to beat his unfilial son and scolded him harshly. "You only learned bad behavior in America. You are not my son, you useless good-for-nothing," and even said, "Get out of this household." Although in reality, Park Soon-tae had not actually expelled him, their relationship had nearly reached a freezing point. At this time, the Park family's second son, Park Hansang, who hadn't received as much attention and pampering as his older brother, had passed the entrance exam to Korean medical school, fulfilling his parents' dream. This highlighted the stark difference between the two brothers. In comparison, Hansang also felt his parents had completely abandoned him. He said that his father's statement, "Get out of this household," had shocked him, making him feel his parents wanted to drive him out of the house and cut ties. And his lifestyle determined that, compared to his parents, he needed money more. Hansang stubbornly believed that if his parents were gone, he could possess the 10 billion won in assets, thus developing the intention to kill his parents to seize their inheritance. While studying in the US, he had watched many crime films, including scenes of sons killing fathers and setting fires to conceal the crimes. From this, he decided to imitate these plot elements to carry out the perfect crime in his plan. He even imagined that after succeeding, he wouldn't continue his parents' overly complicated business, but would take the inherited assets to the US or stay in South Korea to establish his own business. On May 13, 1994, Hansang bought a knife and a plastic gasoline container at a store, then purchased 8 liters, about 2 gallons, of gasoline at a gas station and hid these items in his home's garage. During this time, the Park couple was busy renovating and decorating the house. The three of them temporarily lived in a first-floor bedroom below the basement. Since Park Soon-tae and his close friend Lee Gwon-ju were busy collaborating on work, besides the 3 Park family members, the Lee couple and their 13-year-old son also lived with them. Hansang's younger brother, Park Young-sang, was away at school. On May 18th, the Buddhist Lee couple, due to Buddha's birthday, set off on a trip to Swambo, leaving their son with the Park family. Around midnight on May 19th, everyone was asleep. Hansang imitated the style of killers in movies, removing all his clothes in his room to avoid getting blood on his body and to prevent his parents from recognizing him if they woke up. He draped a bedsheet over himself, covering his head, with a knife in each hand, and crept silently into the bedroom. Hansang raised the sharp knives, unhesitatingly stabbing his mother, then stabbing his father as he woke up and resisted. During a continuous 10-minute period, he stabbed his parents dozens of times. Although Park Soon-tae resisted fiercely, in the final moments of his life, he bit hard on the ankle of the intruder as he fell to the ground. But ultimately, both parents died under the knife of their own son. After confirming both parents were dead, Hansang followed his plan by going to the bathroom, washing the blood from his body, changing into sportswear, filling the basement with gasoline, and setting it on fire. The bodies of Park Soon-tae and his wife were immediately engulfed in flames. He didn't even care about the 13-year-old cousin sleeping in the house, leaving the burning house alone, throwing the murder weapons into bushes hundreds of meters away, pretending as if he had just awakened from a dream and escaped, then called the police. Although Hansang had committed the crime naked and subsequently washed his body in the bathroom, he hadn't anticipated that blood had also stained his hair and hadn't been washed away. When asked why he had repeatedly stabbed for 10 minutes, Hansang only replied that he couldn't remember clearly and hadn't heard his parents' screams. After finishing, he regretted it, wanting to save his parents after setting the fire but lacking the courage. He had also considered turning himself in, but because the incident had spread so seriously, he didn't dare. After his crime was exposed, all relatives no longer wanted to contact him. In detention, he couldn't even afford a self-paid meal, nor could he hire a lawyer. On November 4, 1994, the Seoul District Court sentenced 23-year-old Hansang to death for killing his parents. Upon hearing his death sentence, he shouted, "I am innocent," to express his rejection of the verdict, and appealed. On April 24, 1995, the Seoul High Court rejected the appeal, upholding the original sentence. On August 25, 1995, the South Korean Supreme Court once again rejected the appeal, declaring the sentence upheld, finalizing the death penalty. South Korea, at the end of President Kim Young-sam's administration, namely on December 30, 1997, carried out the last execution and has not executed anyone since. Hansang, who was sentenced to death at that time, was very fortunate not to be on that execution list. Therefore, he remains imprisoned in Daegu prison as a death row inmate. Although South Korea hasn't legally abolished the death penalty, they are very cautious about it. Combined with the cessation of executions, death sentences in South Korea can effectively be considered life imprisonment without parole. Hansang thus began a prison life with no end in sight. In 2015, Hansang, by then 44 years old, responded to a television interview, expressing that he deeply regretted the crime he had committed. But a psychologist who had worked with him for 6 years said Hansang's remorse was all lies. He felt absolutely no repentance. Since he entered prison, due to his lack of remorse, no friends or relatives have visited him. When psychologists visited, they bought him pizza, a luxury food he couldn't eat in prison, but he not only didn't express gratitude, but muttered that it wasn't the brand he liked. In prison, besides fighting with fellow inmates several times and being disciplined, he often asked inmates convicted of political economic crimes, those with more knowledge, about his large inheritance and how to handle these assets. This showed he was still thinking about the assets his parents had left behind. The remorse he proclaimed to the outside world was merely an effort to get his sentence reduced, from death penalty to life imprisonment, then to be pardoned and returned to society. However, the South Korean Civil Code, Article 1004, stipulates that those who attempt to kill direct blood relatives and parents cannot inherit assets. Therefore, the assets he always remembered, which he tried to obtain by killing his parents, were ultimately inherited by his brother. If Hansang were released, with his obsession and without a penny to his name, he would still be at risk of continuing to commit crimes. Therefore, his sentence has never been reduced. Initially, his younger brother Park Young-sang visited him during the trial. Although Hansang's relationship with his parents had deteriorated, the brotherly relationship before the incident was still very good. However, Hansang, looking at his brother who had lost all family members, still insisted he was innocent. After hearing this statement, Park Young-sang left with tears streaming down his face and never met his brother again. The two brothers grew up in the same environment, but lived completely different lives. Previously mentioned was that the older brother was more pampered, mostly from the impression of relatives and friends. But with wealthy family conditions and parents who highly valued children's education, how could they completely ignore the second son? Rather than saying there was favoritism toward Hansang, it could also be said that he had become accustomed to demanding from his parents from a young age, also making many mistakes, in exchange for more attention from his parents and causing them to spend more effort solving various problems, until the problems grew increasingly serious. This case is not just a story of horrific crime, but also a profound lesson about indulgence in family education, about the gap between expectations and reality, about the unforeseen consequences of an irresponsible hedonistic lifestyle. In particular, it serves as a warning about how greed and selfishness can transform a person into a monster, willing to destroy everything, including those who gave birth to and raised them. And that's the case for today. What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.